I'm Ramona Abbott, and this time we are up close and personal with Glenn Hergenhan-Zhao, who is the Artistic Director of the Idiom Theater here in Bellingham. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Excellent. Tell me a little bit about, so you are a, let me see if I can do this, quadruple threat. You act, write, produce, direct, sing and dance? Wait, you're a...
Not much singing and dancing.
Just a little bit.
Every once in a while. I did do some singing in the last production, but not usually.
Okay. So you write, produce, direct, and act, primarily. What came first?
I would say playwriting. I mean, I did some theater when I was young, but I went to school for painting, so I was a painter for a while. And then I started writing plays and just self-producing them. I went to school at Evergreen, and I had a lot of friends that were doing theater down there, actors. I wasn't really involved in theater. And then I wrote a play, and we rented out a theater and did a play, and I've been doing them ever since.
I have to ask, when did you go to Evergreen?
I graduated in 1995.
Seriously, I graduated in 91.
Really?
Did not know that about you up until this point. I love doing this.
I only went 2 years. I went a bunch of other places, and then I went my last 2 years there.
Well, same thing here.
So,
Excellent. So that fueled your interest. So when did you start acting?
Well, I did some stuff when I was younger, but I started writing these plays and producing plays, and then I ended up acting in some kind of by default when I couldn't find people, so I kind of did that for years and years. And honestly, that hasn't really changed all that much. I don't do a lot of acting when I'm in Bellingham because I'm mostly directing, but this the last play that we just did, The Seven Sicknesses, I ended up acting in. And again, it was because we went through 3 different actors that were assigned to those parts that for whatever reason couldn't do them. So it's hard to act and direct at the same time. But when I lived for 4 years in New York, and when I was out there, I was primarily acting. I was still doing some other things. I like acting probably as much or better than anything else, but I don't get a chance to do it as much around here.
So how does your acting experience inform your directing?
Well, it's interesting because I came to theater in kind of a non-traditional way. I didn't go to school for it. And when I started doing this, I think the clearest way to say it is I had no idea what I was doing. We were putting on plays. I didn't really know how to direct. I didn't know how to act. But I think because of that, we kind of created these plays that were kind of refreshing just because they weren't really anti-theater. They were just so like outside of what people thought of theater. Because the group of people that was around me at the time, we didn't really love theater. You know, we kind of made fun of it, and so we didn't know what we were doing. And for 10 years, I would say that was the case. We grew this huge amount of experience because we did a lot of shows. But when I went to New York, I studied acting out there for a little while at the Atlantic Theater, and I did a lot of acting off Broadway and in a few productions with some really talented people, and I feel like my idea about acting got completely turned on its head. You've taken some of the Meisner stuff, and we've been doing these 1 week intensive, 3-week classes out here, and it kind of gives you a little taste of what that process is about. But the idea, I was always very much in my head, and that process allows you to get out of your head.
Right.
And so that's changed my acting and my directing. I try to introduce that vocabulary and use that vocabulary as much as I can, because it's just, to me, way more interesting to watch on stage and more interesting to do when you, as an actor, can not know what's going to happen at any given moment. So that's changed, I think, the style of plays we tend to choose at Idiom. That's changed how I direct. I don't know if that makes sense without going into so much about that method, but
So let's talk, Glenn, a little bit about what that means for our non-audience, our non-theater listeners. So when you talk about a Meisner method, what's a 10-word a summation of that?
That's tricky. It is mostly about being present and not thinking, I would say. So in order for it to work, actors really have to know their lines much more thoroughly than they probably normally would, so they don't have to think about them at all. And like you said, it's akin to improvising because it is improvising. You know your lines, you know you're blocking where you're supposed to be on stage, but all of the decisions that you're making in the moment are in the moment. So even though it's rehearsed, you rehearse the things that aren't going to change, and you want to recreate it new every night and every moment. And it for the audience and for the actor, it has the feeling of not knowing what's going to happen at any given moment, which is, I feel like, what we're always trying to capture. And it's the interesting thing about improv, because everybody knows everything on stage has been created in the moment. It's a challenge with scripted work because the actor knows what's going to happen for the next 10 pages.
And sometimes the audience knows. If it's a play, they know.
Exactly. But when you're really entrenched in that method and in the moment, you forget, and so does the audience. You just you're watching this living thing on stage, and you forget Hamlet's going to die in 2 pages, even if you're Hamlet, which is challenging. But I guess that's there's probably much more graceful ways to put that. But it's all just about getting out of your head.
Well, and I think having taken one of the classes, or a couple of them now from you, I know that one of the challenges, even in the small amount of scripted work I have done, is that very thing. You know exactly what's going to happen, and perhaps each movement is choreographed perfectly. But in this Meisner method, it was very interesting to me because another student and I could run the same scene 3 or 4 different times and have 3 or 4 completely different shadings.
Yeah.
Because we were allowing each other to completely react. And so if your fellow actor gives you a different emotion, then that colors your reaction.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the other thing. If you have both players doing this, it's very alive because what one actor does affects the other, and it's changed. I think, I'm trying to remember some really concise, I think Meisner said it's like acting authentically in imaginary circumstances is like the core of his work.
Which is a nice way to put it.
That's not exactly right, but it's something to that. And like Mamet's big thing, who was a student of Meisner, is invent nothing, deny nothing. We talk about that, which is, you don't have to indicate. It's kind of, you don't have to indicate. You don't have to summon up any experiences. What you're experiencing as a human being, yourself, not your character, at any given moment, is what's going on. So there's not this putting a character on like you would a costume and pretending you're someone else. You let the context of the play do those things for you, and I think that's another interesting thing and a challenging thing for actors is Meisner. You're always you. It's a very vulnerable thing.
And I think maybe one of the reasons it did not seem as odd to me is that I came to it more from an improvisational world than scripted world. So it seemed more, for a while I remember I had a problem going, there's got to be more to it than that, because I was trying to make it harder than it was.
And improvers have a nice natural fit because they're used to not knowing what's going to happen. But they're also used to really being in their heads, because that's the thing about improv is you're just thinking super quick. Right. And there's a difference. Like a lot of times when improvers come and do the Meisner stuff, they try to cheat a little bit. Like they know what it's supposed to look like, and so they go through all the motions. But you're watching it, and it's a fine line. But it's like they're in their head. They're just thinking really quick.
So talk to me a little bit, I know I've been involved with the idiom. One of the slogan, I believe, is the hardest working theater in the world, which I believe, having been involved. Tell our audience a little bit about that. Why that line?
because we do an insane amount of work over there, I'm not exactly sure how it came about. It came about kind of out of necessity. This is a small town. When we first started, it was harder to run things for more than a couple weeks because that was just the nature of our audience pool. And we were doing all original work, so we were writing plays. We would write a play, put it up, run it, write another play, put it up and run it. And so for many years, to the best of our knowledge, and we did a fair amount of research into it, that little theater downtown Bellingham does more original work than any theater in the country. Largely thanks to the fact that we do all these new works festivals and 48s where we're creating sometimes a dozen short plays in a weekend. But an average theater season for a sane theater, sometimes it's 5-6 shows, sometimes even less. We've had a very busy fall. I don't even know how many shows that we've already put up, and we still have 25 shows between now and June. It's a lot, and it's challenging, and it's something that we're always kind of struggling to adjust a little bit, because there's really some nice things that come about with that. It gives people a lot of opportunities to be on stage. We're pretty much a playwrights theater, so it gives playwrights an opportunity to see their work on stage, and directors, and I think that's really important. Sometimes you can go to a graduate program in directing or playwriting, and your thesis is to direct one show. So a lot of people get a master's degree in playwriting, and they've directed one show.
Wow.
And people that work at our theater for any length of time, especially the small pool of writers that we tend to collect, and then sometimes they move off to the big city, but we have writers that have written dozens of plays and got to see them on stage, and that's a rare opportunity. I've written over 100 plays. I don't know any other playwright it's kind of ridiculous to have written over 100 plays, but it gives you a depth of experience to see your work on stage over and over.
Now, I know that I have been involved in a couple of your 48s, so I'll try to sum that up for our audience members. So all of the group meets one evening, and a theme is drawn, and the writers trot off to write all night long, and they deliver a script the next morning at 9 a.m., where they meet with their assigned acting teams and director, who then have all day to learn stage, costume, block, tech rehearsal, and put on 2 shows the following evening at 8 and 10. And if that sounds nuts, it's because it is. But it is a tremendous amount of fun. How did you get started doing that?
We've been doing these for 10 years. I think the one coming up is our 41st 48-hour festival, so we have done a lot of them. There's a group in Seattle that does a show called the 1448. And they did them before we did, and there was a couple festivals before that festival. A lot of people were doing these 24-hour theater festivals, but these guys in Seattle were doing the 48. They do it with a live band, which we've done more recently here. We've started to do that. It was just a natural fit for our theater because we had all these writers around, and it was really kind of in the spirit of a lot of what we were doing at the time, which is just this fly by the seat of your pants, very little rehearsal, and it just clicked with us and with our audiences. And I had the opportunity to go down a few times and write for that festival in Seattle. And since those festivals have been popping up all over. Brian Willis, was a faculty at Western, does one in Tacoma called the Double Shot. We did one for a couple of years in New York City when I was out there. And, I can't say enough good things about them. There's nothing bad about them. They, they allow you to take risks because, they come and go. They give all these people these opportunities. Really, really good theater comes out of them. You'd think, this just writing overnight, would just be a lot of half-baked things. But there's always amazing things and not amazing things. But the audience is up for it, whatever comes out, and after 10 years of doing them, I always look forward to doing them. We have one coming up in January, and then we close our season with one in June. And especially lately, I feel like they've stepped up to another level. We just gathered really great writers and directors and actors, and we've been having live music with them, and the last few have been pretty amazing, I think.
They really have. And when I have people ask me, why do you do this? Or are you crazy? Or what on earth are you thinking? And one of the things I say is, for me, and not having a tremendous amount of scripted background, a little bit, it's once you've accepted the complete impossibility of doing this, in a way, I think that speaks to what you're talking about. It frees you up, because since it's impossible, then you might as well just give it your best shot, because who on earth would think you could actually do it? Thank you, Glenn, for being a part of this conversation today. And I'm Ramona Abbott, and we have been up close and personal with Glenn Hergenhan-Zhao, who is the artistic director of the Idiom Theater here in Bellingham.